So our first competitor is Rachael del Porto.
Okay. A couple weeks ago, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change released their 6th assessment report talking about the scientific literature on climate change. If you've looked at the report at all, you'll notice that after key findings, there are statements of confidence, like low, medium, and high confidence. These are dependent upon the current understanding on that particular topic, and as you can imagine, the higher the confidence, the better. In order for me to tell you how my research plays a part in this, I want you to first think back to when you were a little kid playing outside on a hot summer day, and how if you were running around barefoot and you were running on the sidewalk, you were just fine. But once you stepped over into the dark-colored asphalt of the street, your feet would burn up almost immediately. That's because the dark color, when it gets hit with sunlight, it absorbs that sunlight and it heats up, whereas the lighter color of the concrete is reflecting it. Similarly, if you've ever been to the snow on a sunny day, you know how unbelievably bright it is. That light-colored snow, whenever sunlight hits it, is reflecting it in all different directions, some of which are right into your eyes. Like different objects on the surface of the Earth, there are tiny particles in the atmosphere that pretty much do the same thing. They're called aerosols, and they have a significant impact on the climate. They can come from natural things or from human things like sea spray or from forest fires or from tailpipe emissions. Most of these tiny aerosols, similar to the snow, scatter sunlight, which is a fancy form of reflection. And so what that means is that some of that light will get scattered back out into space. That means it's not reaching us here on the surface, it's not getting trapped in the atmosphere, and that provides an overall cooling effect on the climate. However, there are some aerosols that do the exact opposite. They're called absorbing aerosols, and they do exactly that. Like the dark-colored asphalt on the bottom of your feet, when they're hit with sunlight, they absorb that radiation, they heat up, and they heat up the atmosphere around them, which provides an overall warming effect on the climate. The modeled warming associated with these absorbing aerosols is highly uncertain. It ranges from not very much to potentially all the way up to the second most important agent of warming behind CO2. A part of this high uncertainty has to do with humidity. Humidity, as you probably know, is kind of a measure of how wet the atmosphere feels. And what happens in the atmosphere is these scattering and absorbing aerosols can mix together. And when they become humidified, they can start to take on water, and that could cause them to absorb more sunlight. What my research does is I look at these aerosols in lab experiments and in field observations. I sample them into an instrument, dry and wet, and I see how that changes their scattering and absorption properties. For us to do the best that we can to mitigate climate change, both in policy and other types of things, we need climate models to reflect the processes in the atmosphere as best as possible. Observations and experiments like these that help to constrain these aerosol properties help us truly understand how much these tiny particles impact climate change. Thank you.
That was wonderful, Rachael. Thank you so much. I wondered if you could tell me a bit more about you. What was your childhood dream for a job?
When I was a little kid, I wanted to be a storm chaser. You know, the people who get in the heavily armored vehicles and go around Nebraska or Oklahoma chasing tornadoes. My parents didn't like that, but that's what I wanted to do.
Sounds exciting but dangerous. Glad you picked something that's maybe a little less dangerous. Now, what is your favorite part of doing research?
I really like field work. I like to go outside or have a different change of scenery, and I think it adds a nice piece of excitement to the work. So I enjoy field work, yeah, the most.
Good. And then I think my last question for you is, what do you like to do after a day of work? Sounds like you do a lot of work.
In the winter, I think my favorite thing to do is probably to go home and hang out with the cats and do some painting. If it were warm out, I'd like to hike, but I do like spending time with the cats.
How many cats are we talking about?
2.
Okay.
Lotus and Nutmeg.
And you're the one doing the painting, not them.
Well, that's the goal, but.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Rachael.
Thank you.